Sashi, I really appreciate you grabbing some time to chat. I was really looking forward to this conversation because caregiving, I think within FamTech is a really important part of FamTech. I think when I talk to people about FamTech, I think everyone immediately thinks of parents and kids and early kind of stage of life, but it's every single stage of life. Caregiving is a part of that. So I think maybe to start, just kind of would love to give you the floor and just kind of tell me about your company. And I know you have a company with different parts of a digital platform, and you have a podcast, and there's many different aspects. But I'll sort of give you the floor to kind of set the stage for everything that you've been building.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's always nice to be on this side of the microphone every once in a while because I do a lot of question asking, and so it's a changing it up a little. But yeah, so I am an occupational therapist by training. I worked in the hospital, clinic, private practice, community, all of that stuff for the last 15 plus years. And then just sort of through those different settings, was able to see the impact of caregiving on caregivers, and how there really isn't any infrastructure that has been built, created, thought about around that, especially, early on in my career. And in the work that I did there, it was seeing people that were, it was seeing people that, either a crisis had happened or this was like another hospitalization on top of long-term caregiving. And so really just the wearing down of someone who's trying to juggle it all with no pieces to pull together. So that's where the idea for that started from. And we've gone through a couple of iterations, as any business building does. But we are now a digital platform, and we are we have a podcast that it's not a Dovetail podcast, but it is a podcast where we talk about caregivers, talk to caregivers and how they're managing themselves in the mix of all of this. And just to iterate what you're saying, we care our whole life, whether or not it is for a family member, for a friend, however, but really we're trying to build the technology to make it easier for people to do that. And then there's some accessory spinoff ones, but those are the two big ones.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I have so many questions, but I want to kind of go back in your story, however far back you think is sort of helpful or relevant. Because, having a long career working in hospitals and homes, how'd you get into that kind of work? What was kind of the quick story, the quick origin story of you, kind of entering that world?
Yeah. The OT origin story is that I, like any person who is I think I'm an elder millennial. I don't even know where I fall in the mix anymore.
Yep.
But when I was ending my undergraduate and career or whatever time and trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, I thought I wanted to be a physician because that's, one of those big three careers that people can say like, oh, I know exactly what that is. And not realizing that, there's a lot of different pieces in the healthcare continuum, realizing that like, is that really the lifestyle that I wanted for myself in terms of the years of school and all of those pieces, which led me to going to I shadowed a bunch of allied health careers. Speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy, all of them. I did it all. Yeah. And when I remember I worked with a woman, a therapist in an OT outpatient clinic, and went in, and on the outside, it looked like play, right? It looked like she and this little boy were hanging out together, playing and all this stuff. And I remember he laughed and I was like, okay, that's really cool. Like, can you tell me sort of what you saw in all this? And this woman just downloaded a dissertation on the nuances of everything that happened in that session or whatever. And I was like, okay, that's fascinating. Like, I want to know how that works. My undergraduate degree is also in kinesiology. So study of human movement and how we can adapt and modify environmental factors and performance and all of those things. So it's really, I went from this high performance athlete training background to like, how can we help people that are trying to get to where they were before and all of that. So that's how I ended up in the OT world.
Yeah. Yeah. The OT specifically, I have two kids, and so my daughter is 5, and when she was, I don't remember how old she was, but she had really, really like low muscle tone. She wasn't like really crawling. She wasn't walking. We have memories of taking her to the little gymnastics class, and she would kind of sit there, and the other kids her age were kind of running around. We're like, oh, what's going on? So we had an OT kind of person come to the house, because this was kind of at the end of COVID. So we were able to kind of do it in our house, with masks and everything. But she would show up with a giant bucket of toys and fun little things to play with, and we saw it from that point of view. But to me, that is also kind of interesting, like the behind the scenes stuff, like very intentional, different ways of doing play and crawling and climbing and all that stuff, and kind of seeing what was going on. Luckily, like most kids, she just caught up and everything's fine now. But that was very interesting getting to see that, because from the outside, it just looked like, she was just kind of having fun and playing, but there obviously was a lot of science and a process behind it.
Yeah. It is really cool. And so that was the reason I went into OT school. And then when I was there, you figure out which population you want to work with. And older adults are by far my favorite. And just through the experiences of meeting people in the hospital on clinicals and stuff like that, that's sort of where I ended up heading in that trajectory. And it's really interesting because you're at the other end of the lifespan, right? So it's not, it's how much are they going to get back after a fall, after an illness, after something has happened, and at what point do you have to say, okay, this is where we're at. Like, we're no longer in the development phase of our life.
Yeah.
How do we change all of these other factors around, which is completely fascinating and wonderful. And you just getting a chance to hear the life story of people in their like 70s, 80s, 90s. I've had 100-year-old patient before is wow. Really cool. Yeah.
Was it mostly folks who were recovering from something, or was it also just very general sort of aging and staying strong and all that?
Yeah. The bulk of my career was in an inpatient rehab. So it's people that had been in the hospital for a while, people that had surgery, people that had some sort of crazy event or diagnosis or whatever, and they were coming in. So we only saw them for, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks is really the average lifespan of an inpatient rehab place. And that's what actually led to the private practice, was that I wanted, one of the things that we used to offer in the hospital was home assessments for people that were on the bubble of whether they could go home or they needed more care. And with healthcare reimbursement and, provider timing and all of this stuff, they ended up phasing that out. It was harder and harder to get that. And that was the thing that for me was such a huge value add for these people and their families, and also a really great way to get OT in the house and PT in the house to say, what are your actual hands-on real-time challenges, and how can we have the most impact in the shortest amount of contact time with people?
Yeah. And then when you sort of came around and kind of developing the practice, was that something that was kind of unique, or was that somewhat common? That's a world I'm not all that familiar with. And also at the time, this was probably a number of years ago, like what did it look like at that time to start a practice like that?
It was a really interesting time because it was pre-COVID. And so there's sort of not a natural order, but sort of like an expected transition that people go through, right? It's like you are independent, and then you need a little bit of help, and then you need more help. And then eventually there's some sort of like housing, nursing home, skilled, whatever that looks like. And so this was before the rush of COVID, when people were pulling loved ones out of facilities and saying, okay, we have to figure out how to do this at home. Yeah. So really, there was a lot of there's always the question of like, what is OT? Who are you and what do you do? Which is something that we actually learn how to talk about in school, because we're kind of in a lot of places. And then the other part was, this is really prevention focused, right? So I'm meeting with families who are saying, we want mom, dad, uncle, whoever, they want to stay in their home and we want to help them set up their home. Or we are going to bring them into our home and we're doing we need to know how to set this up in the
Mm-hmm.
best way possible.
Yeah.
And so it's maybe planning for 2 weeks down the road. It's maybe planning for 2 months down the road. But I knew that because of my experience in the inpatient world, the people that didn't make those plans ahead of time and they fell, and it's because it was a lot of it is that's a kind of a big bucket.
Yeah.
They fell. Now you have a work crew of people. You are not making any choices about what your house looks like. Everyone is going through and making all these adjustments. So the house that you leave is not the house that you return to, and you didn't have any control over those choices because people are going in and saying this is just what needs to be done. So
Yep.
it was really trying to take a step back even farther and say, okay, given that these are typical stages of life, what can we think about in this way to help you feel empowered as the care recipient, help you feel empowered as the family? And really, honestly, 80%, more than 80% of that job was a conversation around the kitchen table with families about what does this look like for you, for what makes sense
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how much help you want, and what does this look like for you in terms of who you want to be involved, what are your choices, and all of these conversations that we try to put off. And it just makes it makes it so much sharper when there's an acute situation. So trying to do that ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I still do that a little bit. I do some consulting work with that still for families. So
Mm-hmm.
that's another little arm.
Yeah. Yeah. And that transition from sort of inpatient to like in-home kind of more consulting, the getting to like really understand the family dynamic and working with families, probably every situation was a little different. Was that a new thing that you were dealing with at the time? Was that transition easy, or did that kind of like come pretty naturally for you?
I think that the difficult part is that when you see people in the hospital, the thing has already happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no what ifs, right? Like everything is very concrete. This is what we are working around. So for me, that the transition of nothing has happened yet, but let's think about this in this way.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily have the same level of buy-in from certain family members. Like there's somebody who calls you to come and do this.
Yeah.
But there's always someone who's like, we don't need this. This is like we're not even thinking about this. I don't understand why we're having this conversation. So there's always that, which is not something that I faced as an inpatient therapist
Mm-hmm.
because there's no concrete event.
Yeah. And was there overlap between the two, or was it sort of you went from inpatient to kind of big decision? I'm gonna like really just focus on the consulting and kind of in-home.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like a black and white.
Yep.
I had transitioned down from full-time to per diem after my oldest was born.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of like, okay, I have some more wiggle room schedule wise. What can I do in this
Mm-hmm.
that helps move things forward? Because honestly, in the hospital that I worked at, everybody that was older than me as a clinician had already had some sort of back surgery from the job. And I was like, I don't see this as a long-term solution.
Yeah.
And going into OT school, instead of, at the time, the degree required was a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And they had just rolled out a doctoral degree, and I stayed and completed my doctorate because I wanted to have the hands-on experience, the clinical experience, but I did not intend to stay, doing that work forever. It was how much experience can I gain and then move on to things like teaching or consulting or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was always the long range goal.
Yeah. And then, I mean, jumping ahead probably a little bit in your story, like starting a company, starting a digital platform, being very kind of entrepreneurial and going and kind of doing all these different things. Was that the whole time in your career? Was that in the back of your mind? Was that something you knew you wanted to do? Or was it kind of like a slow developing thing?
Yeah, I always wanted to work for myself, and I wasn't sure what that was going to look like or what made the most sense. I wanted to do something that made an impact because of what I did. I always felt like occupational therapy was really gatekept by the healthcare system, and many people said, "How come we don't have access to somebody like an OT
Yeah.
ahead of time? How come we're just learning these things now? And I always felt like it's such a huge disservice to families, and especially caregivers, that you don't get a chance to interact with people
Yeah.
until the bad thing has already happened.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I didn't want to be a part of the system forever. So that was, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a long goal.
Yeah. And maybe there was not one giant light bulb aha moment, but probably a lot of little ones of like, okay, this system is a little bit broken. Not maybe not the care, but like the access to care, or the different ways people can access it, or the timing. Probably a lot of little things you were noticing, I imagine.
Hmm.
Like again, the very cliche, like, oh, there has to be a better way to do some of this. So I'm guessing over the years you were building up a lot of that, just real world experience, and then at some point
Yeah.
getting to finding an outlet to sort of say, hey, we can go solve maybe some of these problems.
Yeah, it was definitely probably 10 years of my career thinking that because it was a problem I saw every day, this caregiver logistics piece, I was like, someone is going to develop this platform and I'm going to be able to refer all of these families to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone didn't show up for a decade and I was like, I wonder if I could be someone to do this. I
Yeah.
wonder if. And so through the transition of like being in the hospital, seeing people in person, I had Dovetail started as a paper-based system for people to use in their homes. And I thought, how can I use what I learned in creating the paper products and my experience and my own experience as a caregiver
Mm-hmm.
to really dig into the logistics piece of it?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. And that's, to me, that's the interesting part of the origin story, is starting with like a paper based system of just like gathering, all of this, uh, content or education or stuff that you've, learned over the years. Um, how did that start? How were you using it? And because obviously that like evolved into a lot of other stuff, but what did that
Hmm.
look like when you started?
When I started Dovetail, it was I had two kids. My husband is self-employed. I, at the time, was predominantly self-employed, and in our own life, like two people that communicate, two people that want to be involved in all of these aspects of raising our kids and having our own businesses and all this stuff. Were just stuff started falling through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
You flip the calendar to the next month, and the whole thing looks like a Jackson Pollock because you've got the pens and the highlighters and all that. And I
Yeah.
thought there's no way that we're the only people that are having this problem.
Yeah.
And our unit at that time was so small that I thought, okay, can I fix this for us?
Mm-hmm.
And I took the calendar that was on our pantry door and I flipped it over and I got out a ruler and I got out markers and all this stuff and redrew a calendar that could actually be organized as you went through and did it. And a lot of that came from the knowledge and education and research that I had around working with people that had brain injuries, and
Mm-hmm.
the fact that if you just bombard and hope someone can attend to the things that they need to attend to, that it's not going to be helpful. And so how can we have some sort of almost like a California closets way of putting things in place so that it's easier to do? And so it was really helpful at the time for us. And because OT is traditionally a very low tech profession,
Mm-hmm.
I everything was hand drawn. And I thought, well, okay, well, I figured out this calendar that's working. And I had some friends that came over. We all had little kids, and they were like, "Oh, this is really cool. How did you do that?"
Yeah.
Um, I I created a planner out of, like, those circa rings, that you can like pull paper in and out of to like make your own agenda thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had a pile of paper and I had the rings and I created this whole planner, but I hand drew it.
Mm.
And so so then I found a graphic designer and I brought in like all of my scrap paper stuff and I
Yeah.
was like, "Can you help me make these digital files?" And he was
Yeah.
like, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
And then we went from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's to me always very interesting when anyone is has like a service based business, and then it's like slowly turns into like a product that you
Hmm.
is something that you can give away or sell, or whatever it might end up being, digital or even not digital. Um, were you kind of conscious of that at the time, that, or is it kind of like you started doing it as like, well, this is working for us and maybe it's working for some people we know? Did you see the vision yet, or did that happen slowly?
That was really like it very, very much started out with I can't use this system
Hmm.
as like I can't go to Target and buy one more of the same calendar and like pretend that it's going to solve all my problems.
Yeah.
I had a stack of planners that I used for like 2 or 3 months at a time, and then was like, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
How can I fix this? But I wasn't like, I am going to have this paper based company, and I definitely was not like, at some point this is going to transition to a tech startup.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like staying super curious about it. I sent everything off to the printers at the end of January in 2020.
Hmm.
I had my fourth baby the week of March 10th in 2020.
Okay.
Everything came back from the printer in, I think, end of April, beginning of May. The world was shut down. I
Yeah.
had 4 kids at home, and I was like, I guess we're going into the internet now.
Yeah. Yeah, that I can't imagine the timing of that, because our firstborn was June of 2020, and so
Mhm.
that was right in the middle of it, where we were like, I mean, I guess in a good way, it's like our life was getting turned upside down because we were having our first kid, so it was all kind of
Yeah.
crazy. But my first thought all the time was like, I don't know how people are doing this with one or several little kids at home. So
Hmm.
at that time, like, how did you balance it all? How did you juggle it? Because I assume you still had uh your practice
Yep.
in some form, right? And then you were working on this
Hmm.
other stuff, and you had kids, and it was COVID. Like, what did that period of time look like? Because like you just said, you weren't necessarily thinking of this as like, hey, this is gonna be a tech platform. But what did that
Yeah.
like little chapter of the story look like, and when did you start to realize, hey, maybe there is something here?
Yeah. That chapter was tough. I think I still like, we still talk about this because I have some friends that we kind of all had. I have a really great friend who had her fourth baby in COVID too. And we're
Hmm.
sort of like, what happened?
Kind of a blur.
But it was, yeah. One of the first things that I did was, when I came home and they were like, this is what's going to happen. My kids came home from school with blizzard bags for a 2-week storm. And I was like, it's March. I don't think that we live in New England, but it's not snowing in March.
Hmm.
I, I shut down the in-person work with that company is called Home Field Advantage.
Yep.
So I shut down the in-person things because I was like, there's absolutely no way. It's not safe for my family. It's not safe for me. All
Hmm.
of these pieces. My husband is also an essential service provider, so he was not able to. He never missed a day of work
Yeah.
in that whole experience. So I had 2 kids in remote school. I had a toddler, and I had a brand new baby.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Yeah.
and it
That's
was just, it was totally like, you can try and flex and bend time as much as you want, but as much as you think that you can do, you cannot do. And it was
hmm
really a great experience of like making peace with the fact that this is completely insane.
hmm
So stopping the in-person things and then really just saying, okay, I'll get to what I can get to with Dovetail
Yeah.
when I can, but the priority has to be here. And it was great to have that flexibility to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was also, well, at that point when COVID hit, I was not in the corporate world. I've come from
Mhm.
like marketing and agency world here in Chicago, and so I was on my own, kind of doing consulting work, and so I joke around that I was sheltering at home for a year and a half before COVID, just because I was a consultant working from home, right, and everything was virtual
Like
for me anyway.
preparing.
Yeah, so I weirdly I it didn't impact me that much, but yeah, having a kid changes that, and having
Mhm.
family and friends, and growing a business is hard, even under the perfect circumstances, right? I mean,
Yeah.
even without the added challenges. Um, so I'm always very curious about those like really early days of like building something, and then whether or not you're even thinking about it as an MVP, or even just like, hey, I've got
Hmm.
this thing, I'm gonna like let people use it and get feedback, and good, bad, and pivoting is such a big part in the early days. Like
Yeah.
when you actually had the time to kind of work on it, what were some of those challenges, or even like the kind of things that feel like an early win? When were those coming, and
Hmm.
what did that look like?
I mean, the earliest win was the fact that everyone was home and people were now like this was in everyone's windshield,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. And so it was a great time to launch the product
Yeah.
that it sold well. It was a great time to be home and figuring out how to build these pieces. Like how do you register a domain? How
Mm-hmm.
do you build a website? What does it look like? How can you do all of that? So those were some really good early wins. And I think too the realization that I had even in the early days of the paper-based system was that this was not the right lane for this,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a really hard space to my concern was the caregiver, and a lot of the things were being grouped into, you know, not like home decor almost, right? It was like, how do you make everything look social media wonderful, right?
Yeah.
Like how do you have an aesthetically pleasing planner? And that was not my vision. My vision was like, how do I keep people from feeling like they're in the wrong end of the wave pool over
Mm-hmm.
and over again? But there wasn't a market for it. Like Famtech didn't exist at
Yeah.
that time. Like it just was not in everyone's vocabulary the way that it is in the last couple of years. And
Yeah.
so I took a lot of the feedback from people. Like, I really like that it does this. I really like that I can put this in here and these are priorities. And then as we moved through the pandemic and people started to go back out into the world, and the electronic pieces of schools and hospitals and all of that came sort of more back online for
Mm-hmm.
people, I got really curious about what it would look like to have this as a digital platform.
Mm-hmm.
And since people are that's where we're headed,
Yeah.
or it seemed like that's where everything was headed back to. How can we be involved in a way that's helping people right where they need it, right in their
Yeah.
back pocket?
Yeah.
And that's so it was good. It
Yeah.
was all good feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. Because eventually, and I know today you have sort of different, I guess, audiences. You have more of the direct to consumer and kind of a different
Hmm.
B2B sort of lanes that you might work in. In those days, again, kind of like the early days, did you have like a really crystal clear idea of like, okay, like when you said the caregiver was what you thought about, you looked at it through their lens, and to
Hmm.
me that's the best marketing that anybody can do, because like there's branding and design and making stuff look flashy, and that's great, but like when you have like the target audience, like a very good idea of who it is you're building for, to me that's the most important part. What
Yeah.
was it really really specific in the beginning, and did it really change at all?
um it has always been. No, it really hasn't changed, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
So there's a story that I tell about when I was a student doing a fieldwork placement. I was at a huge hospital in Boston, and I had this couple that came in. The husband he had really like serious diagnosis, and he was getting progressively worse. And they weren't from the US, they were from Europe somewhere. And he was getting worse. She was trying to like reach out to people at home, and they had kids here and things like that. And she was just in the hospital like all day long. Um, and he eventually got better, a little bit better, and he went home and had a relapse of what was going on. And he came back in the hospital worse off than before. And I remember at one point he coded in the hospital, and like I don't know if you've ever seen a code happen in a hospital, but it's kind of it's like a really coordinated circus. Lights go off, there's announcements, everyone has a place to go and do this and stuff like that. And I remember I was standing at the nurse's station because I'm an allied health professional. I am not on the code team. And there's everyone going in the room, and the carts are going in the room, and there's like a ton of activity. And my first thought was not, I hope he's okay.
Mm-hmm.
My first thought was, where is his wife?
Mm.
And I started walking around the floor, and I found her. She was in the corner at the other end of the hallway, and she was by herself because her kids were not there. People don't prepare for this, right? And I will never forget the look on her face of like, she was completely alone and the worst thing was happening to her.
Yeah.
And just the feeling, like just seeing somebody be completely alone at the scariest time of their life. And I think about that when I think about building this out, is like, for every person that gets a phone call at 2:00 in the morning that like, mom fell and broke her hip. Mm-hmm. And you're not in the healthcare track. You don't know what's going on. And now all of a sudden your entire world is upside down. You've got to learn how to navigate new healthcare technology or terminology. You've got to learn what all of these pieces mean. And like, it's such a significant fork in the road that is really difficult to prepare for. So that's the person, that woman is the person that I think about when I think about the product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, in a weird way too, and this happens with a lot of founders, like you, by almost every metric, like you're an expert in all of the stuff that's going on, yet the audience, the person that you're building mm-hmm. for is probably more times than not, like very much not an expert in that stuff. So you have to sort of like have different switches and turn off the switch of like, okay, I'm the expert, person with all the healthcare experience. And now I'm, have to like really look through their lens. And that is so hard to do for most mm-hmm. founders. So that's sounds like that's something that you were kind of doing from almost the very beginning, which I imagine is a good thing.
Yeah. It's been really interesting. And, being able to having the experience of seeing so many families and working with so many patients and just sort of, having that piece. And then in the beginning of building it out, I've interviewed over 100 caregivers outside of that role to mm-hmm. say, where does the friction start for you? And what's the thing that if you had, it's that magic wand question, right? Like if you had a magic wand, what's the thing that you would change, or what's the, whatever. It's that kind of thing. Like where is it that you feel like you just want to throw your phone in the river and walk away because mm-hmm. it's just all too much?
Yeah. I'm also curious about more of the marketing stuff. Like in mm-hmm. those early days where you've built something, you've got an idea who the audience is, you've sort of seen a lot of it play out, like you said, where the friction is and where you can help address some of that. Once you kind of felt like you had a product and you're at that point where like, okay, I just need to get more people using it. I need to get feedback. I need to, reach, figure out a way and the time to like reach the right people. Mm-hmm. Just from a marketing perspective, like was that something that you struggled with? Was it kind of a slow process? Was it really like a grind just to kind of do that? Did you have people helping you? Like what? Because I think that's where a lot of founders kind of get stuck is if you don't mm-hmm. have that marketing background, you sort of hit that wall of like, okay, I've done a lot, but like now I just need people to kind of see it and use it and touch it and give me feedback. And how did you sort of navigate that, or whenever that stage happened for you?
Yeah, I think that was really one of the realizations that led to the transition to digital. Mm-hmm. It was, okay, I've made this. I feel like there's a lot of really, really good parts of the products that I have, these paper products that I have. I also recognize that this is a really muddy place to try and have this message come through, mm-hmm. right? I don't want to be in the planner world just for the sake of being in the planner world. Yeah. So am I going to spend time and energy and money investing in marketing to try and stand out from a really, really huge, um, a really huge pocket? Or am I going to transition and actually build the thing that I think? Am I gonna take this, what I've learned so far, and iterate into this digital world? And so that for me was actually a pretty big kickoff for that, because I don't think that, like I said, the having the transition to digital is where we were going anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of felt like I would be spinning my wheels just trying to stay in that space.
Yeah.
And so that was a shift in focus, and really allocation of resources to
Mm-hmm.
try and go forward. But that stuff is hard. It's so hard. Any founder that's listening, like, it's so hard to be so close to something
Mm-hmm.
and not feel like if somebody doesn't buy it, or someone has something negative to say, or someone's like, I just don't get it, that it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, really have to separate yourself from what you're putting out there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just hide in the fetal position in your office all day.
Yeah. Yeah. And within FamTech, or just mission driven, kind of family focused products or services, that there is so much of that is like pretty personal. So it's it's hard to separate it when you have something you kind of, a lot of founders kind of pour their heart and soul into something, and then can feel like, okay, I've got this like product sitting on the shelf, so to speak, digitally, or a physical product, and that can be hard. And well, I am curious about the whole kind of from sort of paper, kind of analog to digital. When you did like really make a decision, okay, I'm gonna go figure this out. Did anything surprise you about how it evolved, maybe from one to the other, or more about like the process of doing it? Anything surprise you?
The learning curve was steep in that transition. I mean, and that's the other part too, right? It's like, again, I always say at some point, being a tech founder was not on my career bingo card. Like, I couldn't have thought I'd be farther away from where I am right now at the beginning of it.
Sure.
But yeah, it's really, it's another level of education and learning curves. And really, unfortunately, I started this prior to so much of the platforms that are available now, in terms of like the low code, no code pieces where you can stand up an MVP really quickly, where you can get something into the market really quickly. And that, I mean, it is good and bad, right? Because we were able to say to build the back end of this. The back end of Dovetail is overbuilt because we didn't have access to a lot of those pieces that are available now, which necessitated me learning a lot about the back end, which, now I see people like, they're pulling ads out or apps up in, a couple of days or whatever. And I'm like, it was a long time. It was a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
But I know that where we're at, like, our foundation is that we are in a better position to grow from here. We don't have to go backwards and sort of piece it together to move forward. But yeah, a lot of learning curves, a lot of terminology, a lot of not wasted time, because I refuse to say that I wasted time,
Sure.
but a lot of time that I wish I could have back.
Yeah. That's probably a good way to put it. Did you know kind of as you were building it, like what channels you wanted to be in, how you wanted to sort of go to market, or, I mean, maybe marketing, or just literally just the product, how people were going to, find it and access it?
Yeah, I wanted to be direct to consumer first, because I wanted the people to have access to it that could potentially fall through the cracks, right? Not trying to align with healthcare providers, not trying to align with insurance, not trying to align with HR and future of work and all of those things, because those are really big channels, and they're really important channels, and they're channels that we will definitely be pursuing.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure that impact wise, we were going to be meeting the people that needed it, that would I think become our best resource for feedback for how we roll features onto the platform and what that all looks like. So the focus has always been direct to consumer with, an eventual B2B offering as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I have talked to so many founders now that are sort of at that stage where it's like very alluring and very tempting to kind of go all in on the big go-to-market channels that you might, potentially reach a ton of people quickly, but without having that solid base of like getting it in the hands of users and getting them using it and making sure that it ultimately who you're building it for, like you said, it's for the caregivers. It's not
Right.
you want it to work for the other, more legacy institutions or channels, right? But the user's at the center of it. So that's interesting way that you put that, because I've seen that a ton from founders that it's sort of like the juggling, like, oh, what do we do? What do we do first? Do we do them both at the same time? And there might never be a perfect answer, but at least always looking at it through the lens of, the end user is a good way to look at it, I think.
Yeah. And I think too, from that respect, like rolling it out and having, our first dozen users, our first 24 users, like you're going to get that feedback versus, a B2B sales cycle is very long. And then if people aren't using it, you're not going to get that feedback for a very long time. And then you haven't burned a bridge, but you haven't put the best product that you can put out there for the people that are going to use it. So undoubtedly there are people in offices. 60% of family caregivers are employed. I think it's 60% full-time. And so you've got a lot of people that can access this, but are you putting the product in their hands that they actually need? Or are you just another menu item on the HR printout that they get in November when they have to update their blah, blah, blah?
Yeah. So how long was it of like really focusing on direct to consumer? At what point did you start to realize, all right, we're getting a lot of the learning, a lot of the product is, refining it and making sure that it's ready to kind of look at some of those other channels? How long did that take? What was there a sort of a trigger that helped you realize, okay, maybe now we can kind of pursue both paths?
Yeah, the iOS version launched in July, and the Android version launched middle of October. So actually 3 weeks ago.
Yep.
So we're still pretty early. And so we haven't really hit the B2B trigger yet. That will all be related more to, users and feedback and features and those things that are coming down the line. But right now what we're using user feedback for is to determine the features of the product, that roadmap of when we add and how much we add and what it looks like for the current subscription that we're offering. Because, you can build out the world, but it has to make sense in terms of an operating cost and value for users.
Yeah. And that's actually the question I forgot to ask. When you were kind of launching the digital product, did you look at a lot of different ways of pricing it, of how people were going to access it, or is that something that you sort of came together pretty naturally, quickly? I imagine not. I think most founders I talk to say, "Hey, we looked at a million different options and somehow kind of landed in the one that works." Was that your experience?
Yeah. I would wholeheartedly second and third that. It was a lot of like, okay, so we have an idea about what the product is going to look like and what it's going to do. How do we get it places, and what does that look like for people, and what's the impact? And what we decided on. I mean, there's varieties of care tech products on the market that can kind of do not similar, but there's similar audiences, not necessarily the same. But and the price points vary so widely. And so what we focused on, or what we decided on, is each user is $4.99 a month or $49 a year. And the idea is that you can add people in terms, you can add people to your flock. You can add other Dovetail users to your flock, and that flock is centered around the care recipient. You can have multiple care recipients in your own Dovetail, and that would web out to have people that are that that you would be in the same flock, and then they would have a flock for another person, and that's the model that we ended up with, to really have it be an accessible investment, as accessible as possible, an operating company and things like that. Sure. But having it be that it's not, we don't have multiple tiers, and it's not very complicated. It's, if you need this product and you want these people to be connected, this is how you can get it done. So on Android and on iOS, you can get an individual subscription. If you go to mydovetail.app, you can purchase multiple subscriptions, so that you can actually set that up for people, for that caregiver who's like, look, I'm not checking one more email or text message or whatever. This is what we're going to do. I got this, and here's your login. And now we're all set. So the people have had enough.
Yeah. I mean, simplicity is, that is never a bad thing, whether it's the product or marketing or getting in the app stores. Did you have any kind of horror stories of just navigating that? I feel like most founders I talk to definitely have some sort of lessons learned about that process.
Yeah, I'm forever thankful. The developer that I'm working with is great about, I think that's one of those things that you can't overstate for a founder or someone who is wanting to get into a space that they didn't necessarily start out in, is that you got to find people that you can really learn from, and find people that really know what they're doing. And it doesn't necessarily mean the person with the highest price tag is the person that knows the most. There's a lot of that, but the developer that I work with has a lot of experience in this. And sometimes I get, because I get emails from the app store and stuff, and I'm like, I don't even know. I don't even know where to go. And an email will come through from him with a loom, and he's like, you go here, here, and here, and do this. And I'm like, there is not one hope that I would be able to do this myself. I don't code. I wasn't like, I'm going to build a tech company and now I've got to learn how to code. And I didn't become a marketer. I'm trying to do as many things as I can, and then finding people to help along the way.
Yeah. I've had a whole career in marketing, and sometimes I'll get an email from a client that's like, oh, Google Analytics just sent me this notification. It looks really important. What do I do? And I'm like, I need to go find someone to talk to, because I don't even know. So that kind of stuff pops up constantly for even the simplest of a business with just a website or a Shopify store or whatever it might be. The quote unquote team that you had, you were working with a developer, were there other helpful partnerships or advisors that you kind of had along the way?
I've had a couple of advisors in the sort of the go-to-market part of things, because that's again one of those areas, there's no go-to-market strategy session in OT school. And a lot of people that I have met through in-person events have actually it's really interesting as a founder to go to a variety of events and then sort of connect with people there. Some of the people that I talk to, not weekly, but pretty frequently, about, hey, we're going here and stuff like that, are actually other founders who have built, not necessarily in that space, but they've built and they have an interest in the space that you're building in. And so there's this, I think within the founder community, there's a lot of people out there that know how hard it is, and don't just know how hard it is and they had success and that's it, but they want to help encourage the next generation, so to speak, of founders coming up and making things easier. And they're great to bounce ideas off of. So I've been really fortunate to have that. And I've also put myself in places where I don't have any expertise. I went to, what is it called? It's a huge HR conference in Vegas this spring, not because I know anything about HR, but because my interest was in one day having HR as a channel for the company and doing doing the research now to say, how do we set this up so that when we move into this space, I'm not going to this HR conference in 2 years.
Yeah.
It's that playing the long game, and a lot of strategy.
Yeah. And
a lot of calls.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, famtech.org is, I think how I initially, found you, connected with you, and that I find that's great. As a marketing guy, a little bit on the outside, but all of the founders within that community sort of do fall into, like, everyone kind of falls into kind of multiple buckets. And then there's all this overlap and interesting stuff that I find, people are learning, from even not even going to, a conference, but just like attending a webinar with some experts that talk about, selling into the benefit space or selling into insurance or whatever it might be. Because that, I feel like that's on the radar for, at least on the radar for many, many founders, like you said, for maybe down the line.
Yeah, I think too, the great thing about like famtech.org specifically is that everyone is building in an emerging vertical, right? It's everyone knows that we're in this space of trying to help and trying to come at this, like you said, like people. I haven't met a famtech founder or a caretech founder that didn't have personal experience with the problem they were solving. And I can't say that about every aspect, especially in tech.
Yeah.
People are really, I think they come into it in a really altruistic way, and understanding that there is a deficit, and usually from their experience, a significant deficit in support, or in resources or tools or whatever. And so that's what drives it for a lot of people that I've met through that platform. And that's really helpful as a founder, because it's hard to be in a room with someone who's like, I'm just here for my like $100 million IPO. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I get that, and you should all get paid and all of that stuff, but like, that's not really.
Yeah. And I'll give the same answer through a slightly different like lens, but like my whole career working in marketing and advertising, I worked for agencies for a bunch of years, and then it was consulting for a number of years. And I just had this moment of like kind of taking a step back and going, what are some of the best clients that I've had, and what do they have in common? And it kind of ended up being those mission-driven companies, the more family-focused caregiving, and that sort of like was my roundabout way of saying, okay, I'm just going to go all in on, like, why would I not go all in on the industry where it seems like everyone is very easy to connect with, easy to work with. People are very generous with time and referrals and talking and learning, and so that's been just really this year has been when I've done that. But it was for a lot of the reasons you just said. Like, you can only, I mean, yeah, there's nothing wrong with working for the companies that are just trying to grow the biggest company in revenue, and they want to sell in 5 years. Like, nothing wrong with that, but it's very different working with the companies that are more mission focused. So
yeah, agreed.
And I wanted to ask too about the podcast. When did you kind of think about starting a podcast? What or like around what kind of stage of the journey, and did you have any kind of a vision for the podcast? I know you mentioned you just did 100 episodes, and that's a pretty big accomplishment in of its own, even if you had to change sort of the vision of the podcast over time. But what did that look like? Because this podcast for me is still relatively new, and I'm always curious to kind of hear that little mini origin story within the larger story.
Yeah. So And Both is a podcast that, on Friday, which I'm not sure when this will air, but the second last week of October, we released our 100th episode. So it started in November of 2023 was when we first launched. The idea that I had for the podcast probably started around the fall of 2020. So a good 2-3 years, I kicked around the idea and, went through all not the stages of grief, but the stages of launch, where it's like, I have this idea. Is this a good idea? Does anyone care? All of those things. But it really stemmed from my experience as a caregiver, as a founder in the pandemic, when, I had 4 kids at home. 2 of them were old enough to understand what was going on in the TV if I had it on. So, you're not watching the news. I have a bunch of kids at home, so I'm not sitting on my phone because, nothing was good. Nothing was great.
Yeah.
So, and you're isolated. And so it was this idea of like, how can I have some sort of connection, and how can I not feel like, it's me and applesauce and crackers and remote school all day long?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the mix of all of this, it's really easy to sort of be engulfed by everything else that's going on around you. And so I started listening to podcasts. I had never been into podcasts before. I had never had any interest, all because I was like, moving too fast, going from here to here to here to here. But I was home and I could throw my headphones in and be doing something like, while the kids are in school, if someone's napping, whatever, and listen to a podcast. But what I noticed is that there was podcasts related to parenting, and there were podcasts related to having a career, and there were podcasts that were all very siloed at the time. And I know that podcasting has since really exploded, but I wanted to hear stories of people that were addressing all the different facets of a person. And in motherhood specifically, I think there's a really not expectation, but I think there's a tendency to carve from ourselves in order to make all of the other pieces whole. And it's really easy to get lost in the mix. It's really easy to lose your own voice in the mix, and especially trying to do things like build a company and do better as a parent than I was parented, and all of those things that we're always constantly navigating and juggling and learning and things like that. And I have some really great friends who are just these really fascinating, multifaceted people. And I wanted those stories to be represented, because for me, that's more of a connection community piece. And so I decided that when this pandemic was over, and I had no idea at the time when that was going to be and what that was all going to look like, that I was going to start a podcast. And so in September of 2023, my youngest went into preschool. I had a couple hours of the week that were not free, but they were reliably more quiet than having all the kids at home. And decided to launch the show from then. And it's been really amazing to meet lots of new people and to hear stories, and it's very cool. I love it. I'm so excited.
Yeah. And I've also found, just from doing this, again, not that long, just a few months, even if I never like share these conversations with anybody, like the amount that you're like you said, just connecting with people and learning and hearing different experiences like that alone, that's valuable and almost worth the effort and the time. And then getting to share it is when I think kind of slowly over time you start to notice, who's listening, or notice that, oh, there might be opportunities that plug in with this other business that you have. Like, did anything surprise you once you started kind of putting it out there and just sort of committing to, I mean, at least for me, I was like, I'm just going to do it for a year, and I'm going to put them out there, and I'm just going to like see what happens. And then I'm already sort of being surprised by, some of the interesting stuff that I wasn't expecting. Did you have any of that?
I think it's, in the process of like, because this was happening alongside like the really significant behind the scenes building phase, I was meeting all of these people anyways. And it was this idea of like, well, I would love to just share your story, where people who are, it was in these new founder groups, or other people that weren't necessarily founders, but they were people that were trying to navigate what a career looks like and what motherhood looks like, and how do you do that all together. And so I remember I released, I had like 3 people that I recorded episodes with, and, I recorded one by myself. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's about the most awkward thing you can possibly do. It's like,
oh, I don't know if I could do that.
It's like having a conversation with the wall. Or sometimes I'll bring my dog in and talk to him, as though he is not an audience member, but like, it's just, you feel a little less like you're losing your marbles. But I put out a call for people to, like a guest request call, and I had 20 people sign up that afternoon.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, okay. And there weren't that many shows out, and I kind of was still figuring out the language that I was using to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 20 people just right out the bat. And of course, my first thought is like, oh, is this all spam? And when I'm reading through and it's like, I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about my experience, and this is why this is important to me. And I thought, okay, I think we're good. I think we're in the right lane, and the people have been phenomenal.
Yeah, that's great. I think sometimes too, even if a podcast doesn't directly, because I think a lot of people know it's so much time and effort, and it's like, oh, there has to be, before I do it, there has to be the direct connection with like revenue or like something tied to the business, and that's not going to be obvious right away. And sometimes it's just like a great sanity check of like just connecting with people in your industry, and then how it fits in maybe later, makes sense. But you're not, forcing it. At least I've found. But again, I've only been doing it for a few months, so I'm still kind of early on that journey, having conversations like this.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you too, because your business or sort of the ecosystem of all the stuff you're kind of involved in, you've got Dovetail, you've got, I think you mentioned a little bit of the sort of consulting that you do, the podcast. Did I see also you have sort of is it like an online course or a guide or something to help people, moms, I think, start a business and juggle everything?
Yeah, that was so I helped my husband set up his business. I've set up a couple of different businesses, and that was one of those. It's another one of those pain points where there's steps that you need to go through to set up a business. They're all relatively the same, and there are a lot of people out there who want to charge you a lot of money to walk you through some pretty simple steps on how to do that. There's also a lot of messaging around, in order to set up a business and start a business, you need to do it like you need to work 80 hours a week kind of thing. It's that like all in, like how bad do you want it kind of mentality that doesn't work for parents, right? You can't work till 2:00 in the morning if you're already up at 2:00 in the morning feeding a baby. And that's just not, it's not fair for lack of a grander term. And so I put together this stepwise list of 36 lessons in 6 modules of like, these are the things, like your first 5 decisions to think about. This is like, how do you structure this? How do you save time, effort, and energy? And the course was created out of pure frustration for the fact that people should be able to start a business if they want to start a business without like thousands of dollars and private this and private this and private this. And so that is out there. That's attached to, if you go to andbothcompany.com, that's where that is for people to see the course. But it was really just trying to be, I know a lot of people that want to start a business, but they don't know where to start, or they think like, I'm not the business person. Like I have a really great friend who was like, but I'm not a business person. You're the business person. I'm like, I am not the business person. I'm just the person that's made 7 trips to the bank to know that you have to have this, this, and this, but not this in order to get this done. So.
Yeah. It sounds like it's sort of the knocking down that sort of illusion that there's all these gatekeepers that you have to like go through all these hoops. And I've had people reach out to me in a similar way of like, they're like, I got this idea, but I don't think I could do it. And I'm like, well, if you want to do it, you really could. It's not, here's just the first 3 easy steps that you do that and you're technically doing it. It's, there's so much work after that, right? That comes with it, but at least to get started, sometimes you check off those couple boxes, you get all sorts of momentum and that's probably where 80-90% of people just kind of stumble anyway. So it's great you're helping, people kind of do that.
Yeah, I think too, when you go into it thinking like this is all really hard and this is really complicated, that you're not setting yourself up to have a successful outcome, right? Because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, how do you set up an LLC? Well, where I live, an LLC is 2 pages.
Mm-hmm.
You say what you're doing, you have a code associated with it, you pick a name, you sign it, you send it in with, I think it's $50, and you then, you get it back and you have a certificate, and now you have legal standing, and then you file your EIN. It's,
Yep.
like blah, 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 blah. But it's not, none of it is complicated if you've done it before. So why not help somebody with those steps along the way? Because I think the more people that have control over their career, their time, their income, the better off we're all going to be for in a lot of facets. But I think that there are a lot of really great ideas out there, and there are a lot of really great products that haven't been built yet, haven't been made yet.
Yep.
And that's not to say that every person starting a company needs to start a tech platform, or they need to have that $100 million IPO. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about people that build the solution. I can't tell you how many things when I had little babies, someone built this one little thing because they needed something to solve a problem for like maybe 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
But that's that 3 months that everybody is going through, and not at the same time. So it doesn't have to be massive. It can be a passion project. It can be something, but you should definitely get paid for your time.
Yeah. Well, I can see how that fits into kind of your brand. And here I'm the marketing brand guy. That's where my head goes. I can't help it. But like your brand and how Dovetail and the podcast and these other things all kind of fit together. I'm not sure if that was all intentional or it just kind of happened that way. But at least from the outside, it kind of makes sense. That's where you spend your time and your energy and everything that you're building. You mentioned earlier how FamTech wasn't really a term people used. It wasn't, that relatively new, and maybe a lot of it coming like out of COVID kind of fast tracked some of that. That's at least my impression. With where kind of FamTech is going and kind of the care economy and caregiving in general, like where do you see Dovetail fitting in? What's your sort of like, are you one of those founders where you have a big sort of plan for 5 years out or however many years out, sort of moonshot kind of vision? Do you think about that? Where do you see that all fitting together?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the recognition around FamTech and the care economy is only going to explode. When I went into OT school, that's when the 10,000 people a day turned 65 actually started. So 2010, 10,000 people a day turned 65. And now we're in the last 5 years of that, where at the end of this, we are going to have a massive population of people. 73 million people will have turned 65 in the last 20 years. Back then it was like, what are they going to do? Like, you need programs, you need infrastructure, you need all of that stuff. And that didn't happen because it wasn't sexy at the time to build in that lane, right? It's, how do we have AI, and how do we have all of these other different things that like are fun and cool and all of this stuff. But now the rubber is hitting the road, where people and COVID was a really good jumpstart for recognition, right? How do we really care for people when they're not able to go to skilled nursing, when they're not able to have all of this? Oh, wait a minute. We live in a place where we don't have access to a provider, an in-home care provider when we want one. How are we going to piece that all together? What do we do? And then we know for sure that the caregiver ratio right now is 7-1. Eventually by 2050, it's going to be 3-1, meaning that we're going to have family caregivers that are expected to do the same amount of caregiving, hands-on caregiving, logistics management, and caregiving, all of those pieces. But we're going to have less people doing that. So the problem is not that we can't clone people, right? Like we didn't get past Dolly the sheep very far. We can't clone caregivers and make new caregivers. We have to really help people optimize, and we have to protect the health and wellness of those caregivers in that space. And so now there's this massive push to build these products and build these spaces. I don't know if it's 5 years, but eventually I want Dovetail to be on everybody's phone, not because I want everyone to be on there all day long like social media, but I want people to have a space where they know that they have a tool in their pocket that helps them with caregiving specifically, whether that is with young kids, whether that's with aging parents, whether that's with a group of friends or however that all works, that people have a way to collaborate, to communicate, to simplify, to streamline the process that right now is really the wild west of technology not really having been built up to this point, in the same way that it has for other industries.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my long range goal.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost feels like the sort of 6 degrees of like Kevin Bacon. Like you might
Mm-hmm.
not be a caregiver, but you might be 1 degree or 2 degrees from a caregiver. And I could see, a platform like that, that being different types of users and different roles, and being part of that bigger picture of kind of where Dovetail brings everyone together, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want anyone ever getting a call at 2 o'clock in the morning to that they have to come to the hospital and thinking, now I have to learn how to do these things.
Yeah.
I want someone's first thought to be, oh, well, I've heard about Dovetail and it's going to help me with this, this, and this. And these are all the ways that I can use it to feel empowered as a caregiver. And I can make sure that we're like on the right track for me as the caregiver and also the person that we're caring.
Yeah. Yeah. And caregiving being this like really large kind of umbrella, part of the, as a category,
Yeah.
and where it's going. What kind of advice would you give to people who are just kicking around ideas of starting a business, or developing a product or a service in kind of in your space? I mean, you've talked a lot about some of the stuff you learned along the way, but like
Mhm.
any kind of specific little pieces of advice that you tend to give out to people when they come to you with like an idea or they're just getting started?
Yeah. I think that especially if you're building in this space, that this is not a crowded market. And I think that a lot of times when people talk about tech is they think that, everything is being built or everything's in the process or something, whatever. What works for someone that uses Dovetail might not work for what works doesn't work for someone that uses Dovetail, right? Like say somebody comes on and they're like, you know what, this just doesn't fit how our family communicates. I want there to be an alternative for that. Like it's not, caregiving is not pie. I want there to be other options that are available. And I built this so far. Yes, it's based on feedback, but a lot of it is built around the clinician side and the caregiver side. Somebody else might come into building a care tech platform from a completely different lens, and to really lean into that. When I went to a early founder conference 3 years ago, they were talking about how you had to have a great co-founding team, and your team, everyone's got to go to like this university and everyone's got to have this experience and everyone's got to have this, and if you have that, then all the stars will align, right? Last year or 2 years ago, I went and they said you have to have AI, because that's when AI was really blowing up.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have AI in everything. If you don't have AI, no one's going to look at your stuff, yada, yada. This past year that I went back, they said domain expertise. It's not about the team anymore. It's not about it's not about AI, because that's going to be in everything and all of that stuff. It's about, do you actually know what you're talking about? And do you have deep expertise and knowledge in that? And so that's what I would always advise people to do, is to lean into that and ask a ton of questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice, because the AI thing, I like asking about AI in these conversations, but I also don't want it to feel like it's the central point of the discussion, where it's like all like, how do we use AI? And then how do we use AI to do XYZ? It kind of feels like it should be the opposite. How do we XYZ?
Yeah.
And then AI is the thing that might supercharge like one part of it. And so
100%.
that's hopefully that shift has already happening in the startup world, where we like, okay, we got past that first wave of what can AI do, and now it's how can AI help versus being the thing.
Yeah, and that was always my approach to it, was that I don't want to build an AI company that does caregiving logistics management. I want to build a company that does this and does this really well, because AI is not going to make it better. It's going to make it faster.
Mm-hmm.
but if I don't have all of the lines lined up, and I don't have all of the pieces together in the way that makes sense, it can go faster in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are platform first, AI second.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
Yeah. Someone told me recently, AI does exactly what you just said. It'll help you go 1,000 times faster, but if you're not going in the right direction, now you're 1,000 miles an hour, even if it's like a 1 degree off, like, you're missing the goal by, I don't know, a lot. So,
yeah.
And there's probably a lot more we could talk about AI, but I'll let other people unpack all of that. I really appreciate the time, Ashley. I hope it was nice for you to kind of be on the other side of it. Sort of being,
it's great
being the person kind of answering more questions and asking. But I appreciate the time. I'm glad we got a chance to connect. I knew there was kind of be a lot to kind of unpack and talk about, and I think we got to just about all of it. So before I let you go, I'll obviously include all the links to different of your websites and LinkedIn and things like that. But anything you want to just sort of kind of add here on the end of how people can either get in touch with you or find you, or anything else you want to share, I guess, before I let you go.
Yeah, I will always encourage to have people, if you have an idea, to just stay curious about it. I think that there's a lot of stuff out there that will sort of dissuade people from taking something on, and I would always love to be an example for like, why not me, or why not now? So if people want to find me, I am in a lot of different places on the internet, more than I ever thought I would be again. But you can find me, the central spot is ashleyblackington.com. Dovetaildesigns.co is for Dovetail. Homefieldadvantage.co is the Homefield website. That's the consulting and the corporate side of things. And bothcompany.com has the course, has the podcast, has all of the links to the other episodes. We're on wherever you get your podcasts, and we are at mydovetail.app on Instagram. And then you can find me at Ashley Blackington on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, good stuff. Well, Ashley, again, thanks for the time. Congrats on all the success. Congrats on 100 episodes of the podcast.
Thank you.
And I hope we'll get to stay in touch. I'm sure I'll kind of bump into you here and there, kind of through famtech.org stuff, hopefully. But really appreciate the time, and I'll let you get back to your day.
Me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And, it's, I love the work that you're doing to highlight this, because it's only going to help this industry grow if they can hear about what other founders are doing. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I hope, even if I'm just kind of telling the stories of the founders and I'm kind of getting something from it, that even if it's just that, like, that's a win-win. So, conversations like this help with that. And I hope more people find it. So thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Great to meet you.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.